To order. Pursuant to notice issued on July 17, 2024, the committee is meeting to consider pending legislation. We had initially planned a much more ambitious agenda, but after the attempted assassination of former President Trump 10 days ago, the committee has been focused on getting answers and providing transparency to the American people. This heinous and absolutely cowardly attack should never, ever have been able to happen, and we have to do everything we can to make sure it doesn't happen ever again. Senator Paul and I have announced a bipartisan investigation to get to the bottom of this shocking security failure that enabled this attack, and we're committed to fulfilling this committee's critical oversight responsibility. For the last 10 days, I have been working to secure a briefing, and we believe that briefing, although we're trying to hammer out the final details, will be tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. In the SCIF. It'll be a joint briefing. We are working in addition to the Judiciary Committee. Judiciary Committee, as you know, has primary oversight over Secret Service and FBI, but we'll be there with them with the Judiciary, so we'll be together tomorrow morning. And we're also looking at a joint hearing with Judiciary Committee as well next Tuesday with Secret Service and FBI. I'll have more details confirmed shortly for the briefing and the hearing before it comes out, but keep that in mind. And this is going to take more than one briefing. It's going to take more than one hearing. This is an investigation that will continually evolve, although we do know that time is of the essence to try to do this as quickly as possible, but also do it thoroughly. So if everything doesn't come out in the briefing or the hearing, or not everybody is there who you want, that doesn't mean we won't do that. We just have to do this in a systematic way to make sure that we're doing this in a fulsome, robust, and professional manner. But we intend to get to the bottom of it and make sure that this heinous action can never happen again. So I expect to have details, certainly. I know all of us are frustrated with the lack of transparency that we've seen so far, and I'm frustrated. All of you are frustrated. We're going to be working diligently on this. It's my commitment, working with Senator Paul, and to do this at the committee level. As for today, we're going to be voting on an important bill that this committee has been working on for several months, and afterwards we'll recess and plan to reconvene next week. And I expect we'll be able to consider a number of the remaining bills, give everybody more time to look at the remaining bills and nominations that are on our agenda. We want to try to get a lot of this off our plate before the summer. So please plan to be at that meeting next week when we recess, and we'll be talking to your staffs about that. I note the presence of a quorum, but before we proceed to vote, I'll recognize Ranking Member Paul for an opening statement.
11 days ago, former President Donald Trump was nearly assassinated during a campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, an incident that claimed the life of Fire Chief and Father Corey Comparatori and injured two others, severely injured two others. While the specifics of what happened on July 13th and the days leading up to it are still unclear, we know that there were multiple reports by law enforcement on the ground of a suspicious activity by someone who turned out to be the shooter for over an hour before the shooting actually happened. The shooter was able to position himself on a roof of a building only 500 feet away with a direct line of sight of President Trump. This lapse highlights a disturbing series of failures in our security operations. As the Senate committee with jurisdiction of the Department of Homeland Security, including the United States Secret Service, we have a responsibility to uncover the truth about how the former president and now Republican nominee was almost assassinated by a 20-year-old on an unguarded roof despite repeated warnings. Yet committee members and staff have had to direct attention to a markup agenda of 53 bills, including 18 bills to name post offices. While it was announced yesterday that we're only voting on one bill today, the rest are looming for next week. I think we really need to be looking primarily, if not solely and exclusively, at the assassination attempt and putting naming of post offices on a back burner. We should prioritize obtaining answers to the most basic questions. How did this happen? What measures are being taken to prevent another tragedy from happening again? To President Biden, to Vice President Harris, to former President Trump, what failures led to this colossal disaster? Some of the first steps we need to take are interviewing the lead Secret Service agents in charge for planning and securing the Butler event and local law enforcement officials involved. We owe it to the American people to uncover the truth. While we still don't have all the facts, we do know the shooter visited the rally site on July 7th. On the morning of July 13th, the Secret Service conducted a site briefing at 10 a.m., followed by security sweeps at 11 a.m. At 1 p.m., the doors opened to the public, coinciding with a counter-sniper team briefing on the second floor of the AGR building, the same building where the shooter would later be found. We know that the shooter visited the site with a drone flying over the area, later purchasing 50 rounds of ammunition at a local gun store, the same rifle purchased by his father in 2013. Despite being alerted to a suspicious man lingering at the rally site around 5 p.m., the Secret Service lost track of the shooter. By 5:51 p.m., the Pennsylvania State Police notified the Secret Service of an individual with a rangefinder. At 5:52, the Secret Service alerted the counter-sniper team of the suspicious subject. Reports indicated that the shooter was spotted over an hour before the shooting, and yet the president was allowed to go on the stage. This is an inexcusable mistake. It doesn't make the person a bad person who did this, but it's an inexcusable mistake, and it means that the person who made this judgment call not to warn the president, not to stop the proceedings, is someone who can no longer be in that position and no longer has the trust of the American people to have the judgment to do that job. So without question, that person has to be interviewed. We can't have a hearing or an investigation where we interview the PR people for the Department of Homeland Security. The principals involved have to be interviewed. At 6:09 p.m., several rally-goers noticed this suspicious man on a rooftop near the stage and tried to alert law enforcement. At 6:11, as Trump spoke, the shots rang out. Trump reached for his right ear and took cover behind the podium. Moments later, Secret Service evacuated the former president to Butler Memorial Hospital. Fire Chief Comparatori was hit and 2 others were severely injured. The Secret Service counter-sniper team returned fire, wounding and killing the shooter. Later that evening at 10:30 p.m., the Secret Service turned this over to the FBI. Nearly 2 weeks have passed since Americans witnessed an attempt on a former U.S. president's life in broad daylight. Yet so many questions remain unanswered. Monday, the House Oversight Committee hosted a hearing with Secret Service Director Cheadle. She came only under duress. She came under subpoena. We have to use the power of the subpoena because the natural tendency of the executive branch under either party is to cover up and not to reveal things. Their attempts now are not to reveal who the Secret Service agent was in charge and not to allow them to testify. That cannot be tolerated, and that person should be brought forward as soon as humanly possible by subpoena. The independent review panel created by the DHS Secretary Mayorkas earlier this week does not address our need for transparency and congressional oversight. How can we trust that this board, that is exempt from the Federal Advisory Committee Act and other transparency laws, will deliver a truly independent investigation? How can this board access classified information while members of this committee have yet to receive a classified briefing on the incident? Will the board's full report be made public to the American people, or will the public only see an executive summary, as has been done in the past? The review board could take 6 months to complete its work, well past the presidential election, well past many more rallies for former President Trump or for the new nominee, Kamala Harris. We need to know now, will they be safe? Given the urgency and importance of this issue, the committee's sole focus should be the investigation instead of other committee business. I ask the chairman to join me in insisting on having at least the Secret Service Special Agent in charge from Pittsburgh, the Secret Service lead advance agent for the Butler event, and the leaders of local law enforcement agencies involved in the event come to this committee before we leave town next week. It is our duty and our utmost responsibility to ensure that we learn from this failure and hold those responsible accountable. We owe it to the American people to uncover the truth.
Would be very helpful to have that as well. We can do other legislation as well. We can chew gum and walk, and much of this is bipartisan, that is non-controversial, that really takes very little time to do other business. But we plan to devote all of the attention that we need to this important investigation. I'd like to get to the markup, but I'll entertain other brief quotes. This could get us.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yeah, Senator Scott.
So anybody that's been a governor before knows that when you have something like this happen, you just do constant briefings, right? What I don't understand is why Mayorkas, Cheadle, Ray are not doing daily briefings. Because we're all sitting here taking all this information in from people saying, all these things are happening, there's all this conspiracy. How is it good for anybody? For sure, it's not good for us, but it's not good for the administration. So I just don't get why they're not doing daily briefings.
Well, we'll have a briefing tomorrow. Final details are still being hammered out, as I mentioned, but tomorrow at 8:30 we'll have a briefing, and we're looking at having a hearing early next week with the Judiciary Committee, putting it all together. So it is, it's not for a lack of effort on our part. I share your frustration. I share your need to get all this information out, because it is of the utmost importance, and we'll be doing that. Mark your calendar, be there tomorrow morning, and look forward to Tuesday getting into this. We have to get as much done before we leave for the summer, but we're going to continue to work over the summer. Our staff will continue to work. Each and every one of us will continue to work. This isn't going away. This is important. This is a fundamental attack on our democracy, is what we saw. When people go to a political event, they should not be fearful that they could be the victim of a shooting. Our presidential candidates and presidents and former presidents all deserve to be protected as well. An attack on any of them is an attack on democracy, and we will not stand idly by and see that happen. We're going to make sure that the service has the resources, the tools necessary, the procedures, the protocols, and when there's failure, we're going to call them out, and people will be called out for that.
Well, let me yield to Senator Hassan first, and I'll make my
Senator
comment.
Hassan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will be honored to associate myself with your remarks just now about the importance of getting to the bottom of what happened, the attack that this was on our democracy. I will also respond to my colleague, who is also a former governor, that one of the things I learned as a governor, too, was the importance of making sure that there were briefings, but also making sure that we weren't interfering with an active investigation, because, of course, getting to the truth of the matter is the most important thing. And so I would just ask us all, as we go through this process, to think about the structure here and the importance of not interfering with an ongoing investigation. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Johnson.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think everybody on the committee is well aware of the fact that I had my investigators immediately reach out to state, local, and federal law enforcement. Fortunately, local law enforcement has been talking to us. I made the decision to issue preliminary findings because, we weren't getting anything from federal law enforcement. I mean, I was shocked by now former Director Cheadle's lack of testimony before the committee. And she kept saying that it's only 9 days out. And I was thinking, it's been 9 days, and you can't answer some basic questions. So as important it is to get briefings and hold hearings, we just saw the non-result of a public hearing. What you need to do is you need to do the basic investigatory steps. And I'm sorry, I have, in my role in investigating these things and seeing the corruption within the FBI and potentially within the Secret Service, we can't rely on them to do the investigation themselves. We need to do what we can do. Now, there are certain things we simply cannot do. We don't have the forensic. We don't have the people on the ground. But we can do transcribed interviews with witnesses. That's what my staff immediately started to do. Again, we got cooperation out of local law enforcement. We haven't got butkus out of federal. They're doing what they always do. They, put in the deep, dark hole of their investigation. And, of course, that's what Director Cheadle used as her title excuse. Oh, I can't answer this basic question that they ought to be able to answer. For example, that there were 8 shells found near the dead body. We finally got eyewitnesses, and I was able to release that yesterday. Why didn't the Secret Service director provide that basic information to tamp down any rumors? I think you were all on the Senate briefing where both Director Ray and Director Cheadle said, look, we got to make sure that these conspiracy theories don't take hold. Well, the way to do that is to be transparent. the American people understand that what is released preliminarily is preliminary. It's incomplete. You know, we may get more truth, but we need to be transparent. But what I'm saying is this committee has to do the investigation, not just rely on briefings, not just rely on talking to people at the top, but I mean talk to the public, get their transcribed interviews, get transcribed interviews for all law enforcement, and more importantly, I don't have the power right now to use a compulsory process. But we need to use that, and we need to use it soon. Not wait, not allow them to drag the feet, not allow memories to fade. We need to hop on this now, and we have to do an actual investigation, not just oversight in this case. We need to do investigation. My investigators are already on it. I'm happy to share all of our investigatory material. What I want to be is a full partner in this process, not just have this all within the committee chairman and ranking member's staff, but I mean involve also the permanent subcommittee investigation. Quite honestly, any member of this committee that has staff that has investigatory skills, we ought to be involved in this thing, fully involved. I mean fully involved, not sidelined. So that's my request, fully involve me. I want to completely be transparent with the public and this committee as well. So that's my commitment, if I can get my commitment from the chairman and ranking member to fully involve me and my staff in this investigation. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Senator Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Certainly, I understand the need for a full-throated investigation, but we have a crisis right now. We don't need to form committees to understand that there were systemic failures there, that there are significant cultural problems within the Secret Service. And I would call on the White House to appoint some type of a crisis team, a crisis management team to go into the Secret Service today. Yesterday, it could be composed of retired Secret Service agents, interdisciplinarian groups as well. We have a problem today. It can't wait 3 months, 6 months, 3 years to get this, the study done, to get the hearings done. It's a crisis today. We need leadership from the White House to appoint some type of a crisis management team. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Hawley.
I want to just associate myself with Senator Johnson's remarks. Thank you, by the way, Ron, for your report and for the investigative activity that you've been doing. And I also just want to say something about whistleblowers, because this committee has a long history with whistleblowers, and rightly so. Whistleblowers are protected by federal statute, and they are often absolutely vital in gathering information, and they have been absolutely vital in the last 10 days, 11 days. We've had numerous whistleblowers come forward to my office. I think on this committee, I think there have been multiple folks who have been approached by whistleblowers just based on press reports. It strikes me, and it is no credit to the FBI, the Secret Service, that almost everything that we know that is fact-based out there now is because of whistleblowers. Because of a whistleblower, we know that law enforcement were assigned to the roof of American Glass Research Building 6. And by the way, I've been there myself. I share Senator Johnson's instincts. I went myself with my team last week to see. Whistleblowers now tell us that law enforcement were assigned to be on that roof, and they abandoned their post. Whistleblowers tell us law enforcement were assigned to patrol the perimeter of Building 6, and they didn't. They abandoned their posts and decided to go inside. We wouldn't know any of this. In fact, based on the briefings we were given, I had the distinct opposite impression. In fact, not just the opposite impression, the now former Secret Service director, and thank God she's former, she said that the Secret Service deliberately decided not to station anybody on the roof. That turns out to be false. That's a lie. That's just a lie. And they also said that the Secret Service had never denied the Trump campaign any resources that it asked for. That's a lie. It's a total lie. So already the public has been lied to time after time. And thankfully, we have these whistleblowers who are coming forward. So I just want to say to whistleblowers out there, we need you. We will protect you. You are fully protected by federal law. Any member of this committee will absolutely protect you if you will come forward. But we have got to get this information out to the American people. I don't want to be sitting here in another 50, 60 years having the conversations we still have about 1963. The American people deserve a heck of a lot better than that. They deserve full and total transparency, and so does every single person running for president and every person who is a former president. And heck, as the chairman said, every person who goes to a rally. It can't be in this country that if you go to a political rally, you fear for your life. We have got to do better than this. And this committee, I think, plays a vital role. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hawley. And in terms of whistleblowers, this committee has always been out front to make sure the whistleblowers come forward and are fully protected by all of the powers that we have. We'd like to hear from those whistleblowers too. Please, the whistleblowers that you have talked to, if they would come to us as well so we could hear that story. That's how you get to the bottom of this, is through whistleblowers. In fact, we have a spot on our website too for folks who are watching. If you're a whistleblower, you can reach out. Know there's confidentiality, know that you will be protected, but we do have to get to the bottom of this, and we'll continue to work. And then, and Senator Johnson, I want everybody engaged in this, and we welcome that. I have a document request that we're trying to get out. We've been slowed down for a variety of reasons to getting our document request. I want to get that out today. I've sent you copies of that. I'm happy to provide that to anybody else as to the documents that this committee is asking to get immediately. We can expand that list of documents, and your input is important, but I don't want to argue and debate over, well, we want other documents too. No, that we're past arguing about which document not. Let's just get documents. Let's get the information in right now so we can start this. And I'm open to having every member engaged in that with us so we can act quickly. So we don't act like a committee that's trying to negotiate everything for 2 weeks before something goes out. Time is of the essence, to your point, Senator Johnson. Memories are fresh. Memories can be altered by other information that comes later, not intentionally, but just subconsciously that happens, which is why it's important to be out very quickly. And we're going to continue to do that. So please know that this committee has a history of always working bipartisan and together. That isn't going to stop now, and this is incredibly important. Ranking Member Paul.
As people are invited to testify, I think it's important that the invitations go out as soon as possible, but they also have a follow-along conclusion that if it's not voluntary, that we will have a bipartisan insistence through subpoena. I think that encourages people to come voluntarily if they know it's going to happen. But I think it shouldn't be open-ended that we invite people and a month from now, then we kind of get together and you know, kibitz about whether or not we're going to actually do a subpoena. So if we can have a strongly worded letter, including specific people, the FBI, the Secret Service agent in charge in Pittsburgh, the Secret Service agent in charge of the operations, as well as the local law enforcement people, particularly the people that were in the building where the shooting occurred or adjacent to the building where it was occurred. But I think it has to include, we want you next week. And if we really, that's what we should say. We want you for the hearing next week, all of these people. And if we do not get a response from your attorney within 48 hours, you know, that we then will follow on with the subpoena. But that would require, you know, we have to be sincere, work together and say we really are going to force the issue. But what happens too often in all committees in Washington is it drags on for a number of reasons, but because we're not willing to put the force of subpoena behind it. So I think even the initial letter should say, we want you to come voluntarily, list the people individually, as many people, getting advice from as many members of the committee that want to recommend people who need to be interviewed. Let's get that out there and say, if you do not appear voluntarily next week at a certain time, there will be a subpoena issued for you.
Very good. Any other comments? Well, now we'll proceed to the consideration of S1171. I ask unanimous consent that the committee consider the Peters, Hawley, Ossoff, Rosen substitute amendment as modified to S1171 as the underlying bill. Without objection, so ordered. Today we're going to take a historic step towards passing legislation that will ban members of Congress from trading stocks. This is the first time that a Senate committee is marking up legislation to tackle this issue. Americans deserve to be confident that their federal elected officials are making decisions that are in the best interest of the public and not their own personal interest. This legislation helps work towards that goal. This is a strong and bipartisan agreement. I was proud to lead the effort to negotiate this updated bill, and I'd like to thank Senators Merkley, Hawley, Ossoff, and Rosen for their work in putting this together. This bill, which is built off of Senator Merkley's Ethics Act, includes key provisions that will prohibit bad actors from being able to take advantage of their positions for personal financial gain. The provisions include barring members of Congress, the President and Vice President from buying and selling a range of stocks and financial assets, requiring federal elected officials, their spouses, and dependent children to divest from any banned assets beginning in 2027, and increasing the fines for violations of the Stock Act to $500. In other words, I believe this is a common sense, bipartisan agreement that strengthens accountability for the public and gives Americans the peace of mind that Congress is always working on their behalf. I'm committed to passing this bill and look forward to seeing it move one step closer to becoming law after this morning's action. I'd like to enter into the record a statement from Senator Merkley, as well as letters from a number of good government organizations in support of the bill. Without objection, they'll be entering in the record. And now I'd like to recognize Senator Hawley for his comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for working so diligently on this and accommodating my many suggestions and concerns over a period of months to make this the strongest possible bill. I think it's a terrific bill. Senator Scott threatened me a moment ago that if I made a lengthy statement, we might lose his vote. So I will be extremely brief. I just want to point out that the historic nature of this, finally getting to a vote. There's been a lot of talk about banning stock trading by members of Congress. Never have we been able to get a vote. We're going to get that vote today. And I just think that this is such a simple proposition. The American people, when I go home and I say to folks, they ask me about stock trading, here's the thing that absolutely stuns them. They can't believe that it's legal already. They can't believe we can currently do it. Most members of the public think it's already banned. And when I say, actually, it's 100% legal, they say, why? And there's no good answer to that question. We should be here to focus on the public's business, not private gain. We shouldn't be here day trading. We shouldn't be here focusing on our stock portfolios. We should be here doing what the American people sent us to do. And that's what this bill is about. With that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hawley. Senator Ossoff, recognized for comments.
Mr. Chairman, grateful to you for your leadership in facilitating this negotiation. I am grateful to Senator Hawley and Senator Rosen and Senator Merkley for their contributions. This is a historic moment for this committee. Georgians of all political persuasions, Americans of all political persuasions overwhelmingly agree that members of Congress should not be playing the stock market while we hold office, while we make policy that affects businesses and industries, while we have extraordinary access to privileged and confidential information. We should be focused on the public's interest and not our private financial interests. That's why Senator Kelly and I, nearly 2 years ago, introduced the Ban Congressional Stock Trading Act. That's why I've been honored to participate in this painstaking bipartisan negotiation under your leadership, Mr. Chairman, to get to a bipartisan framework to ban stock trading by members of Congress. I hope that my colleagues will join in reporting this favorably out of committee today, and that we'll be able to take action expeditiously on the Senate floor to pass this measure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Senator Ossoff. Senator Rosen, and then I'll recognize you, Senator Romney. Senator Rosen.
Well, thank you, Chairman Peters, for holding this important markup, for your leadership in this issue. I'd like to thank my colleagues, Senator Hawley, again, Senator Peters, Senator Ossoff, for your commitment and hard work to make this a very strong bill, because we do all agree that members of Congress must serve their constituents and the public, not their own interests. While most members of Congress serve honorably, no federal elected official should even have the opportunity to enrich themselves through corrupt stock trades using information that they gain through their official duties. That's why I was proud to co-sponsor Senator Merkley's Ethics Act, and why I was proud to join again Chairman Peters, Senator Hawley, and Senator Ossoff in filing the bipartisan substitute amendment to strengthen this bill even further. Our bill takes a sensible, bipartisan approach to cleaning up Washington, and I encourage all of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to join me in voting to pass this common sense and important legislation.
Thank you, Senator Rosen. Senator Romney, recognized for comments.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with all the statements that have been made. We don't want people in Congress trading stocks or playing the stock market. That's, if you will, the sheep's clothing over this wolf piece of legislation. What you're not talking about is that this has been drafted in a way that is really quite thoughtless, which is it requires divestiture for people who want to become a congressperson or a president or a vice president. And we had a briefing beforehand to talk about, does the bill deal with, for instance, private investments, private enterprises? And we were told, no, it doesn't. And in fact, it does. And that was corrected a day later. Staff sent a memo around saying they were incorrect. It actually does deal with private enterprises. What that means, for instance, is, let's say there's a family that incorporates their farm. All right, they have a C Corp that incorporates the farm. Someone wants to run for political office, they got to sell it. They got to sell their interest. Have you thought about Donald Trump, for instance? Under this bill, he couldn't become president. I mean, he'd have to sell all of his Truth Social stock. He'd have to sell all of his private investments. This basically would prevent Donald Trump from becoming president if he wanted to maintain his financial assets without getting completely obliterated. So yeah, we don't want to have people trading stocks. Had the legislation been drafted to prevent that, I'd support it. But it calls for divestitures of all sorts of assets that people would have that will prevent them from running for political office. It is a wolf in sheep's clothing because it's been drafted in a thoughtless way. It makes us all very happy. By the way, it's not going to affect me one way or the other for two simple reasons. One is I don't have individual stocks. I bought mutual funds when I got into political office because I didn't want to ever have anyone question whether I was working on behalf of the public or myself. And number two, I'm not running for office again, right? So it doesn't apply to me. I'm saying this as an American concerned about being able to attract good people into political office. And if we tell them, you've got to sell family businesses, whether public or private, you got to sell all your securities. These provisions are extraordinarily detrimental to being able to attract good people into public office. So it's a noble cause, which, by the way, is a messaging bill. This has been drafted in a way to say, look how tough we are, and we're gonna stop any kind of corruption. We don't have examples, by the way. Is this a solution looking for a problem? Do we have members of Congress trading in inside information? Or presidents or vice presidents? It's against the law if we do, all right? It's already against the law. So we have law to prevent this. But the idea of this legislation causing these massive divestitures of the candidate, his or her spouse, and their children, potentially family farms and other businesses, this has not been thought through. And while lots of people are going to vote for it because they want to be on record for opposing people trading in the stock market, that's not the problem with the bill. And it was not drafted in a way to focus on the real problem or potential problem. It was drafted in a way to be punitive and to keep Donald Trump from being president.
Seeing no other comments, does anyone wish to offer an amendment?
Well, no,
I'm sorry, Senator Johnson.
So first of all, I want to agree with Senator Romney. I came in here happy to vote yes on this self-flagellation. For my own part, what I did when I ran for office, I divested myself of all my marketable securities, turned them into cash. I've been sitting on cash. And you know how much I've lost in terms of opportunity cost since that point in time. So, from my standpoint, I was able to do that. I had the capability of doing that. I thought that'd be the honorable thing to do. My wife has since purchased an ETF, which this does exempt, and I think that's a good thing. I would caution people in terms of, I'm going to vote no now. We don't want to turn Congress into a rich man's club. I think it's already suffers from that. And again, I thought also, and I would want clarifications, mainly the reason I'm asking this, is are private businesses exempt or not exempt from this? I was told, again, it's hard to interpret legislative language, but if, I'd have rather large manufacturing company, which I did not divest myself immediately, I since have, but that would be grotesquely unfair. We're going to limit the number of people, by the way, qualified people. I actually want people with manufacturing experience or business experience. People who've been successful in life. I'd like to see successful people come to Congress and bring their successful skills to bear here. So, again, I agree with Senator Romney. Insider trading is already illegal. I don't know, I think there's all kinds of suspected abuse. A lot of people come into Congress and all of a sudden they're multimillionaires later. But I think we do need to exercise caution. But again, I'm primarily speaking at this point because I want clarification. Does this or does this not exempt a private company of somebody who's going to run for office or a member of Congress? I mean, all of a sudden, does that have to be divested? Because I think that'd be a travesty, quite honestly.
Is there an answer to that question?
The answer is that it's exempt if it's a small business as defined by the Small Business Administration.
So how small is small, defined by 500,000?
500 employees and under is a small business.
Definitely put me down as no.
So let me ask a question. So if you have 1,000 employees and you own it and it's just your private business, you have to divest of that business?
Yep.
Well, that's insane. I mean, who would want to do that? I mean, farms, family businesses have been going on for generations that they keep together, and sometimes families divide it by shares. We're going to make people divest of those privately owned businesses, and we think that's a good idea? I don't know. I mean, the thing is the popularity of voting for this to show you're against bad things is out there, but it's like, you know, one of the senators today said that no congressperson should enrich themselves from illegally obtained information. That's not what this bill's about. This isn't about illegal information. This is about owning stock. This means you're criminalizing everybody who wants to own stock. There's potentially a 27th Amendment violation in this, too, with taking people's salary. That's being adjudicated before the courts currently. But to vote against this sounds like, oh, gosh, you're for corruption. Nobody's for corruption. There are laws we passed, and I voted for the Stock Act a couple of years ago, and the Stock Act helped to ban or further ban what was already illegal. It has always been illegal to do insider trading for anyone in Congress or otherwise. With the Stock Act, the way I understand it is we reaffirmed that. But I do fear that we're doing this, and I'm torn between what will the perception of how this vote will be and actually the how badly the bill is written of what it will do. And did any of the authors of the bill have a comment on whether this would require President Trump to divest? Senator Hawley, do you know what the answer to that is?
Divest from what?
Stocks.
I don't know what the state of the president's, the former president's current portfolio is. Whoever is elected president would have multiple years to comply. But I do know there's always an excuse for why we can't do a stock trade bill. I've heard this for years. And now we're being told, oh, this was drafted hastily. That's just simply false. I mean, we've worked on this for literally years. So I would just welcome those who now suddenly have concerns. Where have you been for the last few years? And listen, I'm happy to work with you as this moves to the floor. We can always do a substitute amendment, that's fine. But I am 100% committed to banning stock trading by members of Congress. So I'm not going to be dissuaded from that one way or another. And we can throw up as much chaff as you want to, but the fact of the matter is, members of Congress should not be trading stock. They should not be. And I know that there are those on this panel who have never supported and are never going to support a stock trade ban. And that's completely fine. That's your prerogative. But let's not pretend that this is about anything other than that. That's what this is about.
But what about banning of owning of your business? I got a family, I don't, but let's say I have a family business and it's got 1,000 employees and I own it. I have to divest in that? Do you think that's a good part of your bill?
Is that the current, Mr. Chairman? Listen, again, I'm happy to work with anybody who has concerns on substance, who would actually like to get to a result on this and thinks it will improve it on the floor. I'm delighted to work with you on it.
Can I make a suggestion which would solve this? Don't force divestiture. You run for office, you have a stock portfolio, that's it. Now you can't trade it. Okay, you can't buy more stocks and trade stocks, so you want to run for, you can hold on to your stocks. Okay? You can always divest. Okay? You can always buy an ETF. Don't force people to sell their business. Don't force them to sell stocks they already hold. Don't force divestiture. Once you're here, you can't be buying and selling. Again, I don't do it. I did divest. I turned it all into cash. Okay? So that's how I handled myself. I don't want to force what I did and everybody else, though. Not everybody's in my position. I don't want to turn Congress into rich man's club. And by the way, I certainly don't want to imposes self-flagellation on other branches of government. We can do this to ourselves. I don't think we should do it to the executive branch or the judicial branch.
Congress is a rich man's club. That's the problem. That's what we're trying to fix. I would suspect that I probably have the fewest assets of anybody sitting on this dais. I am not a rich man, unlike those to my left. So, I mean, listen, the American people look at people like the former Speaker of the House, who makes better returns than anybody in America. They look at senators who were investigated during the COVID pandemic for their miraculous stock trades, and they say, how is this possible? To think that this might become a problem in the future is frankly fanciful. It's a problem now. It is, and it's not just in perception, it is reality. Members of Congress are trading daily based on information that the public doesn't have. And now we've heard the insider trading. I understand that insider trading is banned, but let's be honest. Members of Congress get information that is technically not insider information as defined by the securities laws that is nevertheless extremely beneficial to know, and often we get it earlier than other people do. That's why senators rushed to trade stock at the beginning of the pandemic and were investigated for it. Ultimately couldn't be prosecuted because technically it wasn't a violation of the securities laws. Was it a good idea? No. Should it be happening? I submit that it should not be. So again, I just want to say to anybody who would like to support this bill but says I have concerns over technical aspects of the drafting, I hear you loud and clear, and I'm happy to work with you on that.
Answering your question, former President Trump owns 114 million shares of Trump Media and Technology Group Corp., worth $3.776 billion. He would be required to divest that. All right? That would be at a massive disadvantage for him. Not to mention his other investments. Yeah, so you have Senator Johnson has proposed, what makes a lot of sense, which is to say, if you have investments, you don't have to sell them to run for office. You can't trade. But I didn't say this bill wasn't drafted quickly or hastily. I said it was drafted poorly. All right, there are a number of things the bill does which ought to be done, which I would support. But causing people that are running for office, including the President of the United States, to have to divest of all their public and private enterprise securities is simply something that's a mistake and would prevent people from running from office, including the person who's the Republican nominee for president.
Senator Marshall, you're recognized for comments, and then Senator Langford, you're next.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Certainly, I acknowledge the issue you all are describing, but I'm still going to support this bill. I think it's important enough that we get it to the next step, and hopefully the process can improve it. I would be impacted by the current legislation and have to divest myself of companies that we own prior to getting here. I agree with you completely, but I think this is so important. We need to move forward. My only wish is that we would have included spouses the moment it impacts us, because that's where it's being abused, is on spouses making some of these trades. When you have hundreds of thousands of people following a spouse's member of Congress through a Twitter feed, obviously there is a problem. So I'm ready to move forward with it. Appreciate everyone's efforts on this, and yes, it's got to be amended going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Langford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a person who's sitting to the left of Senator Hawley, we should put our bank accounts side by side and do some comparisons on it. As a former youth pastor, let me just ask a couple of questions on this. Senator Marshall, I think committee is the place to be able to hammer this out rather than between committee and the floor. Committees are designed to be able to have this kind of conversation to be able to figure it out. And my concern is this gives the perception of members of Congress are no longer trading wink, wink, nod, nod, unless it's an ETF, unless it's a mutual fund, unless it's other things. So you can't trade Apple or Microsoft stock, but you could trade QQQ, which has a huge percentage in those, and basically do the same thing. That's allowed in this bill. And so if we're going to try to give the perception that this is blocking members of Congress from owning or trading stocks, but ignore this other part of the market where they're still able to play in the market in that area, I just think it's just not being consistent for us. That if we're going to say we're out of the market, then we're out of the market. If we're not, then let's find a way to manage this. The Stock Act, when we passed that, and I'm one of those that voted for it as well, the Stock Act said it's already illegal to be able to trade stocks with insider information, and to make sure that there's maximum amount of enforcement and transparency, everybody's got to disclose every transaction that you have over $1,000. It's all got to be out there in the public eye, and it's got to be immediate. And there is accountability on that. I would tell you, as a member of the Ethics Committee, we do get contacts from folks saying, there was this trade that happened, I saw it, I tracked it, they were in this committee at this time, they were in this meeting. So some of that dialogue does happen behind the scenes to be able to go through all that. It also, this bill would say that I couldn't own or trade stocks, but my chief of staff who set up the meeting, who actually met with those people first, now they could. The legislative person that sat in the meeting with me, when that inside conversation happened, they could trade on stocks, in fact, on that stock, but I couldn't. So it creates this very interesting, who's actually engaged in actually more inside information than us is our staff. And our staff are all exempted from this bill, saying they have access to all that information, but members of Congress actually cannot. And actually college-age kids are also exempt from this. So a dependent child of a member of Congress, they can't trade on the stock. But if they're 19, they could. And the whole issue of crypto that's come up, we haven't discussed here, but my understanding is this also would preclude a member of Congress from owning cryptocurrency as well. And that's a big conversation as well on the whole digital side of things that we haven't had discussion on. My issue is not this topic. I don't want anyone to be able to trade on inside information, which is already illegal. And I don't want to even create that perception of trading on that. But again, this is not trading, this is owning. And this has a lot of exceptions that are built into it that gives the perception of saying we're not involved in the market when we really are involved in the market, just in other places in the market. And oh, by the way, our staff's still involved in all that, but we're not. It just begs some questions that I think need to be answered. And I think the right place to answer it is in committee, to be able to argue through this and to be able to figure out what's the best way to write it and do it, rather than hoping it gets better when it gets to the floor.
Senator Scott.
So I'm similar to Senator Johnson. I sold my operating businesses, and many of them had more than 1,000 employees before I ran for the Senate. So, but it does make sense. I don't know, we don't want people to do any insider trading, but is there ability to amend the bill now to just say that it's not going to apply to what you own when you come into the Senate or whatever job there is? Because that might alleviate a lot of the concerns.
Consider that Johnson Amendment 1.
Johnson Amendment 1 does that?
No, he's
What's that?
saying it would be.
Will be. Well, we don't have an amendment to do that now, but you can always do a substitute to make those kinds of changes that we could vote on going forward. I think that's tough to do today, but the idea is that we know this process, when we get it out of committee, there's still a lot of work that gets done. We take bills out of here, they get changed. It's not going to move if there are folks that can't be moving on UC, it's going to have difficulty moving if there's opposition, and we'll have to continue negotiations to get to a point where it can actually move. But I want to keep the process moving. I think it's important for us to keep the process moving, and we've done that in this committee.
How about next week? This meeting goes on until next week. Get it drafted and bring it to the meeting next week. Voting today is very awkward, because I'm not going to vote for this bill the way it is because of the divestiture provision. But if instead we say people running for Congress can hold on to private assets and so forth and stocks, they can't trade them, then that's something I could support. But we don't want to vote no on a messaging bill that makes us look bad for acting like we're going to try and allow trading for members of Congress. But let's make the bill something we can vote for and have a positive statement coming out of our committee. So let's do that next week.
Let's do next week and allow the amendment next week.
Well, our amendments are in place right now. We can do a substitute to have a further discussion on that. And there's a willingness of folks to vote for a bill if it has their amendments. You know, sometimes we have folks in this committee who will put amendments forward and still have no intention of voting for the bill. That's kind of exercise that we don't, is not productive in my mind. But if it's something that would actually bring people to support something of substance, then we can try. But I think there's support for this legislation as it is right now in committee. And I'd like to be able to move it today and then continue to have the conversation to go forward.
Well, I'll offer a substitute amendment. I have Romney Amendment 1 is going to be voted on today. My substitute amendment will be that this provision does not apply to securities which are owned prior to the individual becoming a member of Congress or becoming president or vice president.
Securities and assets.
And private businesses as well.
Security and assets.
Security and assets.
We have not seen that amendment, Senator.
You just heard it. And if subsequent discussions need to improve it, fine. But I'm going to vote for it. I'm going to vote for it if that amendment is adopted. If the amendment is not adopted, you're going to see a lot of Republicans vote against it.
Well, I will say, there are strong feelings on both sides of this issue, so it's going to probably be difficult for us to do all of that right now, but I would just like to vote the bill out and continue to work forward clearly. In order, there are people, part of this negotiated deal is that people don't think that those assets should be there because it's always in the back of your mind that you have those assets. You shouldn't differentiate between public held assets and private. You can't say, well, if you own public stocks, you can't hold it, but if you have a private company that's actually less transparent, you can do that. That doesn't make a lot of sense. You got to treat everybody the same if it's going to be assets. You either have assets in or you have assets out. And I would argue that public assets are a lot more transparent than private assets, and yet that's been a focus for a lot of folks as well, just to deal with the public assets. So it is complicated, as we find out. This is why this issue has not moved for a long time, and everybody has raised issues that have been talked about for some time, and I understand all of those issues, and I understand how complicated it is. But I'd like to show some momentum going forward that we are in agreement that this is something that we should be addressing. Senator Paul.
I just want to clarify that the rules, as I understand it, Senator Romney's amendments out there, there's no rule preventing him at this time if he wants to introduce that as a second-degree amendment to his amendment. Now, they've blocked me before doing it. They'll block you if they truly don't want to vote on this. He'll introduce a second-degree amendment to cancel your second-degree amendment or some such thing, and he can make that ruling as the chair. But as I understand the rules right now, you can offer it, and that nobody can stop you from offering it. If you want to vote on a second-degree amendment, you offer it. Somebody writes it down, they announce what the wording is, and we vote on it, or he tries to block you from voting on it, but you can offer it. Adding another second.
So.
Procedurally, his amendment is a substitute, and no matter what, his amendments are deleted.
Senator Romney, I understand your amendment deletes the whole bill. That's the amendment that you're going to change?
Yes, Romney Amendment number 1, right. So we'll change. So the second degree amendment is going to say this: this bill does not apply to retaining securities or assets which were held prior to becoming a member of Congress, president, or vice president.
My understanding is the amendment, though, starts out with striking the whole bill, and that's a parliamentary issue, that we can't accept that amendment.
Yeah, so this will strike that portion of the second degree amendment will strike the former portion and substitute this portion, which I just described. This bill shall not apply to retaining securities or assets which were held prior to becoming a member of Congress, president, or vice president.
You're only doing it for the president or vice president?
Members of Congress, the Senate, president, and vice president.
It doesn't apply to anybody else, right? You're trying to make that.
Just because I think everybody understood the same. I still like the procedural challenges in our amendment strikes the whole bill. So we would have to write out the whole bill again, and then that's just a technical matter.
I'm going to let them worry about that.
So we don't know who this bill applies to yet. So it should be anybody this bill applies to. You know, assets held, not just congressmen, but because we're talking about judiciary and everybody else. So.
Oh, I think judiciary.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Do you have another amendment? You could second degree one or second degree one of my amendments.
Yeah.
Staff, I think we have another one for staff.
No, it's a good point.
I look at the same issue and say, number one, our staff makes more than we do, our senior staff.
Why do you offer your same issue as the second degree? One of my
I'll still say my concern is, because I tried to really, the entire CPA tax. I come in, I couldn't think there's no way for anybody to. Oh, no. But still, they don't want to say it. So we get young kids in college, but we can't get.
do is if Trump sold all of those two social runs for him to stop it.
This bill,
Okay, Senator Romney, the amendment before us?
yes, this bill shall not apply to retaining securities or assets which were held prior to becoming a member of Congress, president, vice president, or other individuals to which this bill addresses. Correct.
Correct, this is on top of the existing bill language, not a replacement of the bill language. So we're going to be clear of what the amendment is.
I guess what we need to clarify here is what we'll be voting on is Romney 1 is modified to insert the substitute of the bill with the language he read.
Yeah, right.
So it's, so we're modifying Romney 1 to be.
One question people are asking is if you want to modify this slightly to cover all the covered investments and not just securities. There's other.
I'm good enough where we are. Yeah, yeah.
Would it be okay to take a photograph?
Good luck.
Peter's people.
Yeah, go ahead, but you're not going to be able to read it.
So the vote before us now is Romney Amendment 1 as modified. The clerk will call the roll.
Senator Carper.
No by proxy.
Senator Hassan. No. Senator Sinema.
No by proxy.
Senator Rosen. Senator Ossoff. Senator Blumenthal.
No by proxy.
Senator Butler. Senator Butler. Senator Paul.
Yes.
Senator Johnson.
On the Romney? Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, I was busy.
Senator Langford.
Yes.
Senator Romney. Yes. Senator Scott. Aye. Senator Hawley. Nope. Senator Marshall. Aye. Senator Peters.
No.
Oh, but that's not added together. That's final. 7. 0, 6, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. doesn't make any sense. Wait, 6-6 in the room. 6-9. Okay. Mr. Chairman, on the vote of those present, the yeas are 6, the nays are 6. On the vote by proxy, the yeas are 0, the nays are 3. On this vote, the yeas are 6, the nays are 9, and the amendment is not agreed to.
The amendment is not agreed to. Are there any other amendments? Seeing none, we'll now go to final passage. Questions on final passage of S 1171 as amended. The clerk will call the roll.
Senator Carper.
Aye by proxy.
Senator Hassan. Aye. Senator Sinema.
Aye by proxy.
Senator Rosen. Aye. Senator Ossoff. Aye. Senator Blumenthal.
Aye by proxy.
Senator Butler. Senator Paul.
No.
Senator Johnson. No. Senator Lankford. Senator Romney. No. Senator Scott. Aye. Senator Hawley. Aye. Senator Marshall. Aye. Senator Peters.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, on the vote of those present, the yeas are 8, the nays are 4. On the vote by proxy, and for the record only, the yeas are 3, the nays are 0. On this vote, the yeas are 8, the nays are 4, and the motion is agreed to.
The motion is agreed to. I'd like to thank our members for joining today's markup. And with that, this meeting will now be recessed. It'll be recessed to a date to be determined by the chair.